Today's guest is Chris Conrad, internationally known expert on the history, medical, social, economic, and ecological aspects of cannabis hemp. Chris Conrad is the author of 4 groundbreaking books and author of the booklet Cannabis Yields and Dosage. He advocates full restoration of industrial hemp, medical marijuana with a doctor's supervision, and setting a legal age of consent for marijuana use by responsible adults in a regulated market. So, Chris, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing quite well. And yourself, Jan?
I'm doing quite well myself. And welcome to Gnostic Media's podcast number 40.
Well, thanks for thinking to invite me. It's been a long time since we've really gotten a chance to chat.
Well, there you go. And let me ask you this. Let me go back to Bach and the Hemp Industries Association. Are those still running today?
Well, Bach really was intended as an association, but primarily to encourage people to start businesses. So once we started having some larger businesses out there, then I folded it kind of into the Hemp Industries Association. Most of the activity that we were doing as Bach, we gave over to the Hemp Industries Association. I was on the board. I was the first president, etc. I was actually on the board when we voted to sue the DEA when they tried to ban hemp foods back in, 2001, I guess it was.
Was it, or that seems almost a little late, wasn't a little bit before then? I remember that, and I remember Trader Joe's being one of the first companies. They took the hemp products off the shelf for, I think, 24 hours, and then the next day they came out and made a statement that they were refusing to uphold the DEA ban.
Well, no, it's 2001 because the reason I remember is because we had the HIA conference. I was on the board, and we had to go to Hawaii, and so there was a time period when we weren't sure we could even get on planes. And actually, that's very interesting, all the stuff around 9/11, right around 9/11, that's when they shot the guys at Rainbow Farm. That's when the DEA put its ruling about hemp foods being illegal. That's when they went after the doctor and the attorney here in California, all right around. For some reason, when 9/11 hit, it seemed like an opportunity for the law enforcement to do a whole lot of things that otherwise would have caused a lot of news. But because of the 9/11, it was their opportunity to do things under the radar. But we still caught up with them on the hemp foods. But if you notice, people still don't talk about the Rainbow Farm assassinations or any of that. And Dr. Fry's case was completely obscured for like 5 years until she was really in trial. So they actually did a good job of timing a lot of their most horrible things that they did to coincide with the 9/11 attacks.
Well, you know what? I'm not even sure I knew about the Rainbow assassinations. Why don't you tell me or tell the audience about that for a minute?
Yeah, the Rainbow Farm assassinations, a couple of guys who had this very interesting position in the movement because they were basically a couple of redneck guys who were very pro-marijuana, but they were also involved with the militias. And so they had these rallies or festivals on their farm up in Michiana, which is, I think, technically Michigan, but on the Indiana border. And they the local narcs sent in police to observe people buying and selling marijuana and so forth at these festivals, and then they came in and tried to first shut them down, and then when they had the freedom of speech right to continue to have the festivals, they decided to forfeit the farm. So they, the guys, Tom and Raleigh, they were advised that their farm was going to be seized, and it led to this standoff. At which they finally they were told that they were going to take the farm and the guy's son, and it really pushed them over the edge. So they decided they weren't going to let anyone have their property, so they started burning down the buildings and went out on the ridge with some rifles one day, and unbeknownst to them, there were snipers in the woods. And so as they stood with their house burning down around them, they were shot to death. And this is basically because the local sheriff didn't like the fact that they were having pot legalization rallies on their farm.
Wow.
And that happened a week before. That like was September the 4th or something like that. And then, September the 11th, of course, it was just starting to get in the news. It was just starting to be discussed in the news that, that this whole thing had been a setup, and the corruption of the police department and the decisions of the cops, and just the fact that these laws would allow the government to take a person's farm and their child away from them because they were speaking against the the drug war. All those issues got swept aside. But there's still, like, there was a wrongful death suit. The son he got back the farm, but of course he doesn't have his dad anymore, so whatever that's worth.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Talk about your educational background and how you got started with the hemp marijuana issue.
Well, my education background is fairly typical for a lot of people. I just have my high school and then Associate of Arts and Bachelor of Arts degree, and then I went back out into the world and started just doing things. But one of the things I did was work as an investigative reporter. And so I got pretty good at doing those kind of investigations, and I totally applied that when it came to the subject of hemp, which really started to me with a two arguments that happened simultaneously in November of 1988, which was, one was that I was, after the election, I got into an argument with some other activists about whether you could change the drug laws or not, the marijuana law specifically. And I was told unanimously that you can't change those laws, leave them alone. It's just like accept the fact that the injustice is here and that this is just the way it is. And they said I would lose all my credibility and be demonized if I did this, took on this issue. And so I was these were friends of mine who I respected, and so I was kind of aggravated that they would take such a negative attitude about something which I felt was fairly important. But I don't know if I necessarily would have really followed up, except that I then at Thanksgiving had a chance to talk to my niece, who was in school at the time and had just taken the DARE program. And I heard about all the horrible lies and bigotry that was being foisted upon our young people in the name of the DARE program and the drug war. And I just thought, well, the whole idea of going to school is supposed to learn the truth about things. And the fact that they're using it as an opportunity to cram lies and the most contemptuous kind of bigotry down people's throat, I found so offensive that at that point I decided I really had to do something. So I approached it, like I said, like an investigative reporter. I said, well, what happened? And the first thing I did was I read the Senate reports of the Senate hearings, which introduced me straight into hemp, because as you probably have read those hearings as well. When you get into
many times.
There's nobody there saying, I want to get high, I have a right to get high, leave me alone, I want to be high with my friends. It's almost the entirety of the testimony is businesses that are saying, hey, we're starting a big business, you're going to cost us jobs, you're going to cost us contracts, we have thousands and thousands of acres already of hemp that we're already contracted for the next 5 and 10 years and so forth. We don't have any other alternative source. And those were the people who got shut down. There was really not that many people smoking marijuana at the time. I think they said estimated 50,000 people or 60,000 people in the whole country smoked marijuana when they made it illegal. And just to show you how effective that is, there's now 70 million people, roughly 1,000 times more, or say 100,000% more than there was when they started the war against marijuana.
Well, I think as an advertising campaign, the war on drugs has been quite effective.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, when you hear the debate, you'll notice that I keep hearing about young kids getting marijuana and people advocating for that, but the only people I ever hear advocating that are people who say that they're against marijuana. I have never heard a person who's in favor of legalizing marijuana say it should be legal for children. There's some people who say that there should not be a law against it at all. It should just be a natural part of society. But that's a little different than saying that we're out there giving it to children. I notice that all the negative stuff you hear about marijuana is coming from the people who, and actually most of the truly entrancing stuff. Like, you hear these stories. I sat in where they have these kids who are mentoring other kids. And to hear them talking about marijuana, it's like, and my life was really shitty, and then one day I started smoking marijuana, and it was so great, and I could do anything, and I felt so good, and everyone became my friend, and then I got in trouble, and so I decided it was bad. But by the time they talked about how great it was, the other kids think, wow, I got to try that. So the program that they have, the DARE program, makes it sound exciting. These mentor programs make it sound interesting and good to people. It's not the advocates out there who are doing that kind of stuff. It's really the prohibitionists. And the reason that they're doing that is because they want to continue to have marijuana be some sort of a problem, which it's really not. And so they have to keep this image of children smoking marijuana up in people's mind as a problem. When in fact of the matter is, statistically, you see that ever since we have made steps on legalizing legalizing marijuana, reforming it, I should say, from Proposition 215 on, adolescent marijuana use has continued to decline. Adult marijuana use has increased. This is exactly the way it should be going, and it's completely the opposite of what the drug warriors want to see happening. So they just continue to do their same lies as ever.